Narcissist, the maternal role, and the lack of control environment. Hello, I'm H.G. Tudor. My video, What Makes a Narcissist, tells you that there are two things that are required. And if you haven't watched that video, I would encourage you to do so to gain a greater understanding of what creates a narcissist. But briefly, there needs to be a genetic predisposition, and there needs to be a lack of control environment. The genetic predisposition often comes from the parents, but can come further back in the lineage. The lack of control environment can manifest in lots of different ways. As part of the forging of my narcissism, that arose as a consequence of the lack of control environment that I experienced, which was a combination of physical, sexual, and emotional abuse, allied with the fact that I was always expected to do better than I ever did, what I call grade B syndrome. Score 2 goals, you ought to have scored 3. Got 80% in an examination, why didn't you get to 90%? You climb the hill, and the narcissist invariably places another hill behind it that you have to then go and climb. It was never good enough. And that takes away the issue of control, because there's never a sense of achievement. The achievement is always belittled, invalidated in some way. The environment that an individual finds themselves is hugely important, and the maternal role is something which is applicable to it. Naturally, both parents and extended members of the family, along with caregivers, perhaps in respect of, say, school teachers or outside organisations like the Scouts or Guides or particular teams, can influence the environment of a child, both in terms of forging a particular environment or protecting the child from a particular environment. The maternal role is particularly important because, in general terms, it is the mother that is seen as the primary caregiver. It still, despite much of the strides that have been taken towards equality, remains the case that traditional roles prevail. You can point to certain examples where they have been reversed, where there is no male involvement, for instance, in the household, or there's no female involvement in the household. One can always point to differences. But in the main, it remains the case that the mother is still seen as the one that provides the nurturing, the empathic, the caring role, supplemented by that of the father, who still is seen as the one that is the provider. Naturally, owing to the fact that a woman gives birth to children, they develop that bond during the pregnancy and for the immediacy of the birth. And naturally, where that bond is missing, that can then lead to a lack of control environment. The influence of the mother with regard to the environment, whether it is a lack of control one or not, and what the consequential impact, has been recently studied. In some instances, the lack of control environment can be created by the mother, with the father unable or unwilling to intervene. That was the situation for me. My mother was the one that created the lack of control environment. In the main, my father, for reasons best known to him, decided that I was somehow capable of defending myself, and therefore spent more time defending what he saw as less able individuals, namely my sister and my brother. In other instances, it may be the case that the mother is the absent individual, and it is the father that takes over the role. In some instances, both parents might contribute to a lack of control environment, or in other instances, it arises outside of the immediate nuclear family. But a recent study demonstrates the importance of that environment, as I have outlined in the past, with regard to the issue of a lack of control or otherwise. A study has suggested that children who receive more maternal affection grow into young adults who are, on average, more creative, kinder, and marginally more organized. In other words, the creation of a healthy environment, and one which is not a lack of control environment, engenders kindness, namely emotional empathy. Over more than a decade, psychologists tracked more than 1,000 pairs of British twins from early childhood to the cusp of adulthood. To assess maternal affection, each of the twins' mothers were asked to describe her children individually when they were aged 5 and 10. The language she used was analysed and scored on a 6-point scale. Higher scores denoted greater warmth, enthusiasm, and interest in and enjoyment of the child. A phrase such as, "She is a delight," "She is my ray of sunshine," for instance, would have landed near the top. The results were intriguing. By age 18, those children who had experienced more motherly warmth were on average more open-minded, conscientious, kind, and agreeable. Importantly, we found this link even when comparing identical twins, said Dr. Jasmine Wirtz of the University of Edinburgh, who led the study. The twin who received more affection from their mother ended up with a different personality than the twin who received less. Since identical twins share the same genes, this implies that the differences could not be chalked up to heredity, and demonstrates, of course, the impact of the environment on the development of the personality of the child. It gives us greater confidence that how children are treated really does influence their personality. In other words, it lends credence to what I have explained about how the environment, a lack of control environment, impacts upon the creation of a narcissist. Parenting appeared to leave an imprint that endured to 18 and was striking. By then, adolescents had been exposed to a cacophony of competing influences, peers, social media, hormones, and heartbreak among them. Traits such as conscientiousness and agreeableness are not merely pleasant, they are strongly associated with success in education and employment, better health outcomes, and greater social cohesion. Supporting parents to be more affectionate with their children could have wide-reaching positive impacts for young people and society. Thus, this study demonstrates that the warmth that was provided by a mother towards her children resulted in clearly the absence of a lack of control environment, and moreover, impacted upon the child to make them more conscientious, kind, agreeable, and open-minded, all aspects which are associated with the presence of emotional empathy. I can certainly attest to the fact that I never experienced any warmth from my mother, a cold, glacial woman, and she remains that to this day, that I was not cuddled, I was not treated with love. I don't require any sympathy for the absence of this, I'm merely stating a fact, and this contributed to the lack of control environment, the opposite of what has been described in this study. Naturally, a father can also provide that affectionate environment, but this study focused on the influence of the mother, and it demonstrates just how important the environment is that is created by the parents, where they are the primary caregivers to a child, in respect of the environment, whether they create a lack of control one, or whether they create one which results in a warm and nurturing one, as described in this survey. I'm H.G. Tudor. Thank you for listening.